Live from downtown Detroit, home of WDIV and Click on Detroit, Local 4 News at noon starts now.
A 7-year-old is shot by her own father in Detroit overnight, according to police. We'll tell you what led up to the shooting that now has him in custody. Rain and even some snow in the forecast for your Thursday. Brandon is tracking what you can expect as the day goes on. But we begin with Beaumont officials sounding the alarm, saying that their hospitals and staff are overwhelmed with COVID patients. That story tops our news here at noon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Evrod Cassimy. Beaumont has hit critical capacity with coronavirus cases soaring here in Michigan, and they say they're caring for more patients now than in the fall, and more than 6 times the amount from February. Local 4's Rod Maloney joins us now live with more on these pretty troubling developments this afternoon. And Rod, they're begging people to take all the necessary steps to stop the spread.
That is true, Evrod. And here's the thing, they're asking for a community call to action. That's the exact quote from Dr. Nick Gilpin today, where he's asking for everybody to really redouble their efforts to try and prevent the spread of COVID. Now, they did say that the Beaumont hospitals, all 8 of them, have 800 COVID patients right now. And it sounds like a lot because it is. Now, it is not the most that they've ever had. Back a year ago, they had something on the order of 1,200 to 1,300. But the doctor says that that's something dramatically different in that back then the hospitals were largely empty and were just COVID hospitals. Now they're trying to have other patients in, and they're trying to discourage the notion of not going to the hospital during this pandemic. And so the problem for them is staffing. They say their staff is tired. Doctors, nurses, everybody servicing the hospital, they're all tired, and it's been very difficult. And when you have 800 patients like this, and that they're younger patients, they're saying that the average age is something on the order of 50 years old now, that it is a real problem. And so they're asking everybody to do what they can to prevent the spread, but they're also asking the governor to reconsider her position of not reimposing restrictions. Here's what Dr. Gilpin had to say.
I'm also aware that the governor has made a very strong statement that or a strong recommendation that people take it upon themselves to restrict themselves. And I think that the people who are going to do the right things are already doing the right things. And the people who are not doing the right things will not do the right things. And so I think some of that is preaching to the choir, unfortunately. And in a time like this right now in Southeast Michigan and in Michigan at large, I do think we have to be a little bit more prescriptive.
And so in the absence of that, he is saying again that everybody needs to mask up, wash your hands, stay socially distanced, and above all, get vaccinated. Now, the other thing that the doctor did say is much like what the CDC is saying, it's going to take 6 weeks for the vaccine to take hold for most people. And right now, with the rising numbers, we can't vaccinate our way out of this thing. And so he is saying that everybody needs to really think about their own personal behavior as they move forward in this pandemic. Now, we're going to take a look at all of this, what was said. We're going to be hearing from the Henry Ford Hospital people today, this afternoon, and we're going to be taking a look at what all of this means, and we'll have full coverage coming up on Local 4 News at 4, 5, and 6. Reporting live in West Bloomfield, Rod Maloney, Local 4.
Well, Rod, a question for you. As Beaumont is sounding the alarm here, I know that last year when we were getting to this point, there was makeshift hospitals. There were makeshift hospitals that were in place. Is there any talk about this being a possibility this time?
Well, they claim, and we've already looked to see this tent, but it's not there, at least we couldn't see it. They're saying that there is a triage tent at their Grosse Pointe Hospital, but they say that they've always had that action plan in place and that they're looking at that possibility of putting tents outside the hospital in the days to come at Farmington Hills and also Dearborn. They're looking at that possibility, but right now the good news is they're saying that they don't need refrigerated trucks for bodies. So we're at that place where things are really getting tight and difficult. We're not critical like we were this time last year, and the hope is from their estimation that we never really get there.
Yeah, and let's hope everybody heeds these warnings and does what they need to do to keep people safe and keep these case numbers down. Meanwhile, Beaumont officials aren't alone in their concerns. The state's top health official, Dr. Johnny Caldoun, says that she's incredibly concerned with the numbers as well. Just yesterday, Michigan reported nearly 8,000 new cases and 35 deaths. And there is some good news on the economy, though, today. The number of Americans applying for unemployment benefits, that actually fell to 576,000 6,000 last week, and that's a new low during the pandemic. And retail sales soared nearly 10% in April, thanks to more people being vaccinated and those $1,400 stimulus checks. U.S. health experts continue to investigate the issues that led to the pause in the emergency use of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Doctors and federal officials are trying to reassure the public about the safety of other vaccines. Here's Tom Costello with more.
Good day. So the latest guidance from the CDC is that outside advisory panel looking at the Johnson & Johnson vaccine once more time. It's now talking about a week to 10 days as it evaluates the data because we now have a 7th woman who has developed these very rare blood clots associated with the J&J vaccine. 7 cases out of 7 million doses, literally 1 in a million. Because of that, the CDC is also trying to reassure the public there is absolutely no connection and no link with the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. This is simply with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and very rare at that. Still, the company is saying that it believes that the vaccine is safe and that the benefits far outweigh any remote risk. Meanwhile, across the country, 13 states are reporting an increase of cases, in fact, up 25% or more across the country. And so to have now this problem with not enough vaccine, it could not come at a worse time. You know, it takes 2 weeks for, in some cases, these blood clot issues to show up. Well, we know that over the last 2 weeks, about 3.8 million people received the J&J vaccine. So it's possible that there could be more of these blood clot issues that show up over the coming days and weeks. And one last note, and it's an important one if you have children, because Stanford Medical School now working with Pfizer to test that vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, in children under the age of 5. I'm Tom Costello, NBC News in Washington.
All right, Tom, thank you so much. Right now, we want to talk about snow. Yeah, let that sink in. It is April 15th, and meteorologist Brandon Rue is tracking a few flakes out there today and more rain, which rain we can handle.
Well, this morning, Evrod, we talked about 10 a.m. or so being the time when it would get a little too warm for any snow. That's not to say we won't get a snow pellet or a few flurries, but it's mainly rain and moving into Oakland County with some drizzle and light rain, but it's very spotty just about everywhere as we look at a freighter down on the Detroit River. Temps are hovering right around 40, but a pretty stiff northwest wind, so it's low and middle 30s for what it feels like as you're heading out. We won't get out of the 40s, and we will have more scattered showers through your afternoon. We'll take a closer look at that and, of course, your weekend improvements coming up.
All right, Brandon, we'll see you in just a little bit. In other news this afternoon, a 7-year-old girl is shot in Detroit overnight, and police say that it was her own father who pulled the trigger. It happened on Appeline, right near Myers and West Chicago. That's on the city's west side. And as Local 4's Nick Monticelli reports, the father is now in custody.
Good afternoon. It was a rough morning in this neighborhood on the west side where the 7-year-old girl was shot. Let me show you what was happening. It was fairly chaotic. At about 11:30 last night, there was this argument between the mother and the father. The mother got that 7-year-old girl in the car. She was driving, and as they started getting away, backing out from the house, the father runs outside with a gun and starts shooting at the car. He shot his own 7-year-old daughter. The good news and the most important news in this is that she is in stable condition. She is expected to be just fine. Now, after that, police get sent back to the house, and he barricades himself inside of the home. That barricaded standoff lasted nearly 4 hours between SRT members, the special response team from the Detroit Police Department, and this man. Now, he turned himself in, and all ended peacefully. It turns out also inside that home were 2 elderly folks. One we believe is that man's father. So again, though, the 7-year-old is going to be okay after being shot by her father. This does bring up an interesting conversation, though, about domestic violence during this pandemic. We knew since the beginning that there would likely be an increase because of added stress, being stuck inside of a home, and we started talking about that. And now the conversation continues. We're on the back end of this pandemic, but things aren't getting any better. And is the domestic violence getting worse? We don't know what started this fight, but we do know how it ended. It's an interesting conversation. We're going to talk to some of the domestic violence experts in our area and the Attorney General. I'm Nick Monticelli, Local 4.
All right, Nick, thank you. Right now we want to get to some breaking news. In the Derek Chauvin murder trial, the defense is rested without putting the former officer on the stand. Chauvin invoked his Fifth Amendment right to not testify in his own defense. The prosecution brought in a rebuttal witness to testify to some of what was brought up by the defense's expert witnesses yesterday. However, the judge threatened a mistrial if the witness discussed topics that were not approved. Closing arguments are now scheduled for Monday. All right, so it's April 15th, as you know, and normally that is the day when your taxes are due. Well, the deadline has been extended this year, but not for everyone. We'll explain what that's all about coming up. Plus, a former Minnesota police officer is set to appear in court for the death and murder of Daunte Wright. We'll tell you why his family says the charges against Kim Potter don't go far enough.